Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And Jim, our good martini can also be found in the lead story of the Morning Jolt. We go to the pages of the Los Angeles Times. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced in his first State of the State speech that he intends to scale back California's $77 billion bullet train project, saying that while the state has the capacity to complete the first leg in the Central Valley, extending the rail line to Southern California and the Bay Area would, quote, cost too much and, respectfully, take too long. The Democratic governor supports finishing the controversial high-speed rail line between Bakersfield and Merced and said it would invigorate the economy in California's midsection and reduce the region's air pollution. But because of the project's persistent cost overruns, mismanagement, and delays, the grand vision of bullet trains whisking passengers from San Diego to San Francisco doesn't appear viable and will need to be reassessed. Quote, there's been too little oversight and not enough transparency, Newsom said. Right now, there simply isn't a path to get from Sacramento to San Diego, let alone from San Francisco to L.A. I wish there were. So, Jim, a couple things here. First of all, Gavin Newsom, apparently, who had no problem with this, at least publicly, as lieutenant governor, now suddenly sees the financial realities here and is pulling the plug, or at least scaling way back, which I guess makes him a little bit sensible in one respect. But this also points to the reality of high-speed rail not being the panacea that the left seems to think it is, from everything from the Green New Deal to what we see in these major projects from Chicago and out to California and everywhere else.
You know, Greg, when you hear people saying, why can't this country have high-speed rail the way Japan does or the way Europe does? By the way, I've been on high-speed rail in Europe. I've not been to Japan. Yeah, it is terrific. What helps is if you've got a bunch of very densely packed cities, either all in a row, as in Japan, because it's just a long string of islands, or if you've got a bunch of cities that are all about 2 hours apart, as in Central Europe and places like that. There are certain places where high-speed rail does make sense, or at least it's much easier to get the kind of ridership that makes it a little less cost ineffective than you have here. You're not going to have that in much of the United States. The closest thing we have is Acela in the Northeast Corridor, and when you say that, everyone who's been on the European train sniffs and says, Acela barely qualifies, and it really only gets up to high speeds at certain points. So the next most natural spot where you'd have a bunch of densely populated cities in a row would be California. And California's been trying to do this for a really long time. Now, this shows you the advantage of a one-party state and the disadvantage of a one-party state. The advantage of a one-party state is at this kind of moment where folks like you and me who are skeptics of the Green New Deal and all these infrastructure products can say, look, it's California. There are no Republicans to sabotage this. Jerry Brown was the big advocate behind it. Newsom is a San Francisco liberal Democrat. This is not some arch right-wing anti-environmental guy doing it. If Newsom comes out and says, look, guys, the numbers just don't work. It's just, it's turned into a money pit. It's way behind schedule. The ridership is just not going to be there. There's just no way to make this work. It has to be the case because that's a complete admission against interest on his part. Democrats control both chambers of the state legislature by wide margins. The only reason they would not do this, Craig, is if it actually doesn't work. And in the Jolt, I made the comparison a couple of years ago. Vermont wanted to enact single payer for every citizen in the state. They couldn't make the numbers work. They realized they were going to have to double their tax revenue overnight to make the numbers work. And by the way, the savings to patients were just not going to be that great. And it was one of those circumstances where they kind of realized this. Our obstacle here is not the Republicans. Our obstacle is math, and math always wins in one way or another. So. Just baffling. On the one hand, it's kind of baffling that it took this long to reach this point. It's kind of a celebration that it did finally reach this point. And the timing could not be better for those of us who are skeptical of the Green New Deal, because look, if it doesn't work in California, it really can't work anywhere. You might be able to argue, look, it's California. The legal process is going to be tougher. The environmental review process is going to be tougher. The cost of labor is going to be higher. The cost of material is going to be higher. But the problem is every state's going to have some variation of it. And as I mentioned, California's cities make this work better than almost any other spot in the country. If you can't do it between LA and San Francisco, there's no way you're going to be able to do it between New York and Chicago. It's just not going to function any better than what Amtrak is doing right now. And with that kind of cost, that kind of government subsidy, that kind of limited ridership, that kind of, it's just never going to function the way the Green advocates would like them to. So it's, this is a really strong argument to say that the Democrats, environmentalists, the Greens simply aren't looking at these issues realistically. And they're, most of their ideas run on, unicorns and rainbows and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you can't get the costs and the regulatory environment to work right when it's all in the same state, good luck getting it to go across multiple states. And you and I could have told everybody about this and saved them a lot of trouble because you and I live in the D.C. area, and they're on this never-ending mission to extend the local subway system out to Dulles Airport, which has taken way longer than anybody expected, cost way more than anybody anticipated, and they're constantly having setbacks with construction and everything else. So it's just been a giant waste of money.
Every once in a while, you'll run into a liberal Democrat who will acknowledge this, but they don't really quite know how to address it. And that is that you look at the subway projects up in New York City. You mentioned the D.C. Metro project. You go to jurisdictions that are all Democrat-run, big cities, and they want to build something. The Big Dig up in Boston a couple of years back. They tend to get way more expensive than even the far-reaching projections expected. And, some of that is labor costs. Some of that is corruption. Some of that is, stuff falls off the back of a truck. Some of that is perhaps some overestimation of the speed of the workers and stuff like that. But generally, just getting stuff built in big public works projects in these big cities tends to be much harder than even its most patient advocates expected. And that's a real problem for both sides of the aisle, not just for Democrats. So Democrats have to be realistic about it, but maybe, just maybe, we could get them to look at issues of competitive contracting and various, precautions you can take to protect the taxpayers by, requiring contractors to give back some of the money if it comes in, behind schedule and things like that. There's room for bipartisan cooperation here, but the requirement is that Democrats have acknowledged reality, and California is forcing them to do that right now.
All right, Jim, let's move on to our bad martini now. And for that, we go to CNN. This is actually from Monday. Wolf Blitzer and New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, one of our favorites for sure. The topic at hand here is the deputy director of ICE complaining about the fact that there's a cap on the number of beds in immigration detention centers. They're saying there's no reason for the cap. We need to have as many beds as there are people that we need to detain, however briefly. And Bob Menendez doesn't like that because he's of the opinion that there's too many people being detained for illegitimate reasons. And here is what he had to say to Wolf Blitzer about this.
The deputy director of ICE says a cap on beds, in his words, would be, quote, extremely damaging to the public safety of this country. How do you respond?
The reason that they are already 8,000 over their budgeted amount, so they're violating the budget, is because of the president's zero tolerance policy that has turned everyone, regardless of their record, into a criminal. For example, if you cross the border undocumented, he has now made you a criminal. He is creating that problem by turning people away who legitimately seek asylum. If a person has a driving while under the influence violation, he is now making that, saying that that's a criminal. What we have seen in the past under, for example, President Obama, that violent criminals, yes, we want to see those persons not only arrested and detained, we want to see them deported.
Jim, what is up with this president who thinks people crossing the border illegally are doing illegal things and people who get caught driving drunk are doing illegal things? The madness of this president.
Yeah, who figured Bob Menendez would be soft on crime? One hung jury away from going to the big house. The tone of his comment is kind of like, since when is it illegal to enter the country without permission and drive drunk? For a really long time, Senator. And by the way, you hear arguments about I think with Mickey Kaus way back when during the Bush administration when they were contemplating a big comprehensive immigration deal program, and I think they had a was when they had the Gang of Eight, or the gang. There was some gang of senators involved, and one of the things that was in there was, all right, well, we want to get rid of, if you're a violent criminal, we want to deport you. And then there was a generally broad bipartisan agreement in that, but the definition of violent crime was in there. And one of the arguments that a significant number of Democrats argued was that driving under the influence should not count as a violent crime. Well, I mean, some people get caught with DUIs, have not hit anybody yet. So in that sense, it's not violent. On the other hand, anyone who's ever lost someone to a DUI accident or has been injured in a DUI accident would say, no, this is an extremely dangerous crime. This kills people. By no means, if you do this, should you be allowed to stay in this country. And it was very interesting to see how fervently Democrats fought this. And the argument in some circles, and I've not seen good statistics to know whether this argument is well-founded or is just kind of pulling stuff out of the air. But the idea is that people who come here illegally, working as laborers, rates of alcohol abuse for people in those circumstances are higher than the average, and thus you end up with more DUIs than you would ordinarily get. I don't know whether that's accurate or not. I don't care whether it's accurate. I think it's safe to say that if you enter the country illegally and you commit a DUI, no, sorry, you're out of here. And I don't think the administration is being harsh in this case. I don't think the administration, coming to this country illegally is bad enough, but we can argue about whether there's some sort of path for you to stay in this country if you've been a good citizen. If you're getting DUIs, you're not a good citizen. And I don't understand why it'd be seen as some sort of terrible injustice for the law to come down on you like a ton of bricks.
No, that's an excellent point. And I think he's being disingenuous at the end of his response when he says, well, sure, if they're violent criminals, we want to get them arrested and deported. Well, I don't know about him specifically, but I'm guessing he's probably in the bunch that loves sanctuary cities, which basically refuses to cooperate with federal immigration officials and hold people until the feds can get there for deportation or other adjudication for people who are in the country illegally.
Yeah, if sanctuary cities said, look, we're going to drag our feet when it comes to deporting nonviolent criminals, you'd get less objection, right? But they're blanket policies. They're not like, well, we'll cooperate with you guys on the rapists, the murderers, the drug dealers, the folks who are really bad guys. But we're just going to be soft on the other ones. That's blanket. We refuse to cooperate with ICE in any set of circumstances. And we've seen a couple of cases where mayors are warning communities about impending ICE raids. Guys, at some point you start demonstrating you're on the side of the violent criminals in this case.
Yeah, we're basically at the point where a lot of the leading Democrats, and we'll see if this comes up in the campaign. I'm sure it will in some regard or another, but I don't know if anyone will ask the specific question. Tell me a good reason why someone should be deported, and see how the Democrats fight over that one.
They probably would say double murder. Single murder, look, we've all been there.
All right, let's move on to our crazy martini now, and let's get back to the presidential campaign trail. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker is running for president, and he is a vegan, which means he doesn't eat meat.
What do you mean he don't eat no meat?
Thanks to Big Fat Greek Wedding there. I really love that one. But a vegan also means you don't eat any animal products. But now Cory Booker's not happy with just him making that decision. He thinks we all should make that decision because it would be for the best for all of us. Let's go to the Free Beacon. Cory Booker said the planet can't sustain people eating meat as the 2020 hopeful aims to become the first vegan president. Booker told the Vegan magazine, I don't know if that's Veg News or Veg News, but I'm not a subscriber, Jim, earlier this month that he became vegan after coming to the realization that eating eggs, quote, didn't align with my spirit, unquote. While claiming he does not want to lecture Americans on their diets, Booker says Americans need to be nudged into fake cheese because the planet cannot sustain the environmental impact of the food. You see the planet moving towards what is the standard American diet, Booker said. We've seen this massive increase in consumption of meat produced by the industrial animal agriculture industry. The tragic reality is this planet simply can't sustain billions of people consuming industrially produced animal agriculture because of environmental impact, he said. It's just not possible. Booker says the devastating impact of greenhouse gases produced by the meat industry is just not practical. The numbers just don't add up, he said. We will destroy our planet unless we start figuring out a better way forward when it comes to our climate and our environment. Booker, who said his vegan journey began in 1992 when he became a vegetarian after reading Gandhi's biography, wants to make the existing model of the food industry obsolete. Quote, you never change things by fighting what exists. In reality, to change something, you've got to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete, Jim. So does that really sound like I'm not telling you what to eat?
Cory Booker, there were certain aspects of your personality and record that I liked, but this is the breaking point. You will get my beef, my chicken, my pork, and my cheese from my cold, cholesterol-laden hands. When I keel over. You realize, Greg, Cory Booker has now turned into that joke. An atheist, a vegan, and a CrossFitter walk into a bar. I know because they told everyone within 2 minutes. Great, wonderful, you're vegan. Like, I know vegans, I know vegetarians. I have no problem with those people. God bless you. You leave more meat for me. And again, if you choose, fine. Some people find great dietary benefits from it, great health benefits from it. If you look around America, you'll notice there are a lot of people who don't. By the way, I'm an interesting observation about this pro-environmentalist concept of meatless Mondays. This idea that there are certain people who believe that in order to set a good example and to make one small step towards improving the planet and reducing all those cow farts that are bedeviling the world and upsetting the Green New Deal plan, that they don't want to eat meat on Mondays. That's fine, Greg, but I don't know. I just have to observe. If you guys had picked Fridays, you'd get a whole bunch of Catholics on board in the spring every year because of Lent. We can't do what the Catholics are doing. No, we got to pick a separate day of the week to do that. By the way, if you ever notice how often McDonald's has the $2 fish sandwiches on Fridays, it's not coincidental. They know a chunk of their potential customer base is walking around with particular dietary choices in mind. But this is where Cory Booker, I know what he's saying, Americans just need to be nudged in that. There's this whole idea of government here and nudge you. It's here to, one person's nudge is another person's shove. And just the idea that these thoughts are going through his head. God, this isn't just the nanny state, Greg. It's the dietitian state. First of all, good luck making this work in Wisconsin. I guess they're conceding that state, huh? How's it going to fly in America's Dairyland? Guess they're just writing off the whole Midwest, writing off the South, right? We need a barbecue-less America. Good luck. Cory Booker will win the salad bars of America, and that will be about it in the Electoral College.
Jim, so many different thoughts here. First of all, I'd love for a reporter to ask him straight face, you don't mean bacon, too, when you mention that, too.
Also, a genuine curious question about one, what was the last time he had meat, and two, what meat food tempts him the most?
Yeah, that would
put out bacon cheeseburgers in front of his whole staff and see who breaks first.
Secondly, I'm getting the distinct impression here from the left that they're not just after cow farts; they might just be after cows in general. If you're going to ban beef, they're just going to get rid of the whole thing.
Gary Larson, where are you? Because the Far Side did more for cows than anyone. God, yes, I remember, I think it was Mark Stein who had this really good rant that he went off on the National Review cruise years and years ago, where he said that, Greg, we live in a world where, Putin and Russia are moving into Ukraine. The Chinese military keeps making aggressive moves in the Pacific. Obviously, there's a world of ISIS, Iran, the potential of their nuclear program, the basket case that is Venezuela. There are really horrible, North Korea, right? The world has horrible regimes. The world has horrible groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram and all that kind of stuff. But if you're an American, you wake up every morning and somebody in media is telling you, you're destroying the world. You are the greatest threat this planet. Never mind all these people running around killing people. You're the real problem because you're eating a Big Mac and you're driving an SUV. And I think most Americans are just tired of it. They're just tired of being told that they're the villains in the narrative, that they're the real problem. In a world with, just vivid, right there, in-your-face threats that come from all kinds of places like that. So there was a time, and I mentioned this, the 2000 era Cory Booker was actually, pretty sensible, pretty centrist, big advocate for school choice and vouchers and, running against an established, failed urban democratic machine. He's now not only completely assimilated into the collective of progressivism, he really has just become, he could end up becoming its most unsufferable advocate. Which, again, you don't usually see, Stanford tight ends telling America they got to stop eating meat.
If you were a Republican operative and you wanted to burrow yourself into the Democratic 2020 presidential campaign in the world of ideas, and you were trying to basically sabotage whoever became the Democratic nominee, Would you come up with a more effective platform than don't eat meat? We're going to take away your cars. We're going to take away your planes. We're going to jack up your energy prices. And we want abortions right up to the moment of birth. So far, this is about as well as a subterfuge campaign could work.
Is this the Karl Rove mind control machine they kept talking about?
We'll see what happens tomorrow, Jim. I'm sure we'll have at least one crazy. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to tune in again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.